All right, well, let's get on into it then, shall we? Obviously, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you guys all had a really nice holiday last week. I hope you all have something really fun planned for New Year's Eve tomorrow night. Holy cow, I can't believe we're already here. Like I said, we're going to keep today's presentation short and sweet. We're going to be sending you guys away with a set of scanners that you can use right now and going forward throughout the new year. We're going to be talking about how the scanner works, how you can adjust it to make it more tailored to your personal approach. And then what I think you guys are all here for, we're going to be digging into a few of the names that it's uncovering and kind of why we like them. As we all know, we are in the final days of 2024 here. And what seems to be at the top of everybody's mind, I know what's definitely at the top of my mind right now, is what names should I be focused on for 2025? Right? I'm not so much thinking about quick trades here. I'm more so thinking about where the puck is headed, right? There's that old saying, don't skate to the puck, skate to where the puck is going next. My northern Canadian friends have probably heard that more than once in their lives. So the question that I'm kind of asking myself here is, are there any new leaders that are emerging that the overall market isn't just like going head over heels for yet? What names are showing signs of trend strength right now? What names are being accumulated right now? These are the questions that I've been asking myself. And I thought that if I'm asking myself this stuff, then you guys might be too. So we put together a new scanner that we're going to share with y'all today. We're calling it the Emerging Leaders Tracker. And it's meant to address these pretty basic questions, right? We've developed it in such a way that it's meant to uncover names that are beginning to catch the market's attention, but perhaps are not quite yet household names. So when you run this scan on your own, you're going to find like there are names that are starting to really move here. We're not just looking for totally bottomed out names. There are going to be names that have already made some decent moves, but we're going to dig into a little bit more here in just a second. So breaking down the scan, I'm going to run into the market scanner here. And I'm going to pull up my emerging leaders tracker scan. Now, this, you guys don't have it yet. We're going to share it with you. But let's break down each piece of what I was looking for, right? I said trend strength. I said accumulation. I said new emerging leadership. So that's really what I've got defined in the three sections of this scan: trend strength, accumulation, leadership. So I want to talk you through each section so that you know what it's doing. This first section here, this is the trend strength section. In the case of trend strength, I wanted to keep it pretty simple. I wanted the conditions to be loose enough to yield quite a few results, but also tight enough to weed out any obvious weakness. So I went with a 50-period EMA on the weekly time frame. And where I got specific here was how that 50-week EMA is acting. I've defined it as increasing every week over the last 4 weeks. So these first 4 conditions here are defining that piece. The 50 EMA on the weekly right now is greater than it was a week ago. 1 week ago is greater than it was 2 weeks ago. 2 greater than 3. 3 greater than 4. And then I've also included a condition that puts price above that rising EMA. Weekly price close greater than EMA 50. So generally speaking, if price is above a rising longer-term moving average, that's going to weed out any weakness for me. It seems pretty simple. It seems pretty basic, but it's actually really powerful and does a lot of the heavy lifting. The next piece is the accumulation piece. Of course, accumulation is all about volume, right? And specifically in these criteria, I'm looking for an increase in average weekly volume over the same period that that 50 EMA is increasing. I figure if volume is increasing in a name, especially if that increasing action is consistent over multiple weeks at a time, that's a really big tell that money is moving into that name, maybe seeking shelter in that name or just loading up on that name. So that's what I've got defined in these 4 criteria. The only thing that's different about these guys compared to my EMA is simply that I have these offset by 1 week. You don't get a new average weekly volume reading until the end of the week. So I have this offset. I'm looking at last week's average volume compared to 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago compared to 3, 3 compared to 4, 4 compared to 5. But that average weekly volume is stair stepping higher for a month in a row. And then finally, the leadership piece. On TrendSpider, we've got the perfect tool to address the idea of identifying leadership really, really efficiently. We call it the relative performance indicator. Some of you guys have probably seen this. Some of you guys are already maybe utilizing it now. But for those of you who are not yet familiar with this, I want to take a moment and just talk through what it is and what it does, how it works. The relative performance indicator is a really powerful new tool that we brought to the platform a couple months ago, and it's designed to help traders quickly and efficiently identify the strongest and or weakest, if that's your thing, stocks by comparing their performance relative to a defined benchmark. So it quantifies how a stock's price is performing relative to all of the other names within a chosen group or benchmark. And by default, that benchmark is preset to the S&P 500. Now you can adjust that. You can compare to price performance of all the names in the Russell 2000. You can compare to all the names within the same sector, all the names with the same market cap, all the names in the same sector with the same market cap. You could choose any of these that you want, but S&P 500 is the default, and that's how we've utilized it in the scanner today. We're actually going to give you two versions of the scanner today. One that uses the S&P 500 and a larger cap list, and then one that uses the Russell 2000 with the small caps list. So by default, the group is the S&P 500. Like I say, you can select other options here. And what this comparison does is it generates a percentage value that ranges from 0 to 100. So this relative performance indicator just oscillates between 0 and 100. And the value that you're getting represents the stock's relative standing within its benchmark. So for Apple here, it's got a relative performance value of 88.7%. That means that it's outperforming 88.7% of names within the S&P 500. A high relative performance value, be it in the 80s or in the 90s or even at 100, right? 100 is the highest. That's going to signal really strong outperformance. And what that means is that the stock is among the top performing names in the benchmark. By focusing on these extremes, these upper ends of that spectrum, we can easily pinpoint leading stocks to potentially capitalize on their momentum. So let me pull this back down here. Oops. Make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to reopen the scan here, and going back into the leadership section of this scan, I have relative performance defined as being greater than 92, a constant value of 92 within the last 5 sessions. So this is today, yesterday, day before, day before, day before. And I've got this defined as any of the following. So within any of the last 5 sessions, the names that are coming up in this list are in the top 8 percentile of performance relative to the S&P 500. I use that any definer to simply loosen the requirements slightly. Relative performance doesn't often change a great deal from day to day. So as long as it's hit that value, that 92 number within the last week, I'm kind of assuming that the name is definitely leading. The only times you're going to see relative performance drastically move in a single day is if you have some sort of, big news come across the line, maybe, a big earnings report or something like that can force relative performance to move quickly. But otherwise, it's kind of going to move a little bit more slowly. So with these 3 sets of criteria defined, we run the scan, and what we get back is honestly, a really thorough list of names. I'm kind of scrolling through it here so you can see. It looks like a lot of names, but the reality is it's about 160. And so what we've done is we've scanned this through the NMS composite. When I look up the NMS composite, that's 3,200 symbols. So we're getting 160 symbols are actually meeting these relatively basic, relatively simple criteria. But we filtered out 97% of this list. So only 3% of the names in the NMS composite are actually meeting this criteria right now. We've really, really honed this thing down quite a bit. But 160 names is a lot to analyze for one person in one go. This could take all day to go through all these names. So I want to give you guys an idea of how you can make this a little bit more tailored to your own approach. And so the next thing that I like to do once I've got this set of names is I like to do something that I call define my minimums. Minimums are essential criteria. They're conditions that absolutely have to be true in order for me to even consider trading a stock, right? These are types of things that you define even before technical or fundamental criteria that you might be actually utilizing the scanner for. For some, maybe that's a minimum price condition. For others, maybe that's a minimum volume condition or a market cap size, or, really it's up to you to decide this stuff here. And we left kind of that piece of this scan open for you to make it your own. So in order to do that, I'm going to click right here where it says make your own copy. Currently, I'm just using the version of the scan that's shared from the TrendSpider account. So I'm going to make my own copy here. And where it says add a human language condition, I'm going to select that. And I'm going to add in a few things here. With the human language condition, I can just type in like a kind of like a sentence of what I want to define, and the platform will automatically script that for me. So I'm going to say price close greater than $5. And it goes ahead and scripts that for me. And I'm also going to say average volume greater than 500,000. So again, like I said, these are just very basic minimums. I'm trying to get rid of kind of, more penny stock type of names. And I want names that are relatively liquid throughout the day. So average volume of 500,000. So I'm going to rerun this scan. And we're going to get back a new list. And that new list, as you can see, is quite a bit shorter. That's the whole list. So we've just taken that 160 names or whatever it was, and we've whittled it down again to kind of more like 60. Now, to me, this is a much more manageable list of names to work with. So now I can focus in on the title of today's webinar, right? Stocks ready to explode in Q1. What's the key piece in there for me? Well, to me, it's Q1, right? While all of these names theoretically have that kind of potential, there are other tricks that we can utilize to hone this list further to get more specific to Q1. And the first idea that comes to mind for me is seasonality. Now, of course, seasonality, I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with seasonality charts. You've seen us post them. If you have a TrendSpider account, you've probably played around with them before. For those of you who are not familiar, seasonality breaks down performance by month of the year. You can break it down by week of the year. You can change the criteria here. This is week of the year. You can break it down by day of the week, break it down by even hour of the day, right? And so what this allows us to visualize is how often those months are positive months, the average the average return per month historically, right? So on Apple here, over the last 44 years, January has a 60% win rate and a mean change of almost 4.5%. That's pretty good odds for January being a decent month for Apple. So we can utilize seasonality in a couple of ways. There is the very obvious way. I can start scrolling through this list and keeping my eye over here in the upper right-hand corner of my chart, I can just kind of visually analyze, how do these names tend to perform? Right off the bat, I see a name in this list that has really high performance in January, 73% win rate over the past 12 years, an average return of 22.5% over those 12 years. That's pretty crazy. This thing has moved quite a bit in the past couple of weeks, but we kind of would expect that because that's what seasonality tells us. December, 75% win rate with an average return of 45%. So I could do that kind of visual analysis, right? I could go down this list. Obviously, Adam seems to perform pretty well. If I check out some of these other names, BTDR looks like it performs well in March, and so on. But if you do this visual analysis, you're going to forget really quickly the names that you want to maybe dig in a little bit further on. So this, to me, is a good opportunity to highlight the TrendSpider Trading Tool Store. So if you go to trendspider.com/trading tool store, and we're going to send you guys a link so that you have it. Inside the store, we've got a bunch of different things that we've shared with y'all. Strategies, scanners, indicators. And in the search bar here, if you type in seasonality, you're going to find this indicator, seasonality indicator. This was developed by one of my colleagues, James. And what this indicator allows us to do is actually define seasonality. It's an indicator that goes on our chart, which means we can then utilize it in our scanner. So if we want to utilize this list of names, like I said, it's about 60 names here, and we want to scan for specific seasonality conditions, the next step that we need to take is we need to turn this list of scan results into a static watch list. So that's what I'm going to do. Up here in the upper right hand corner, the three vertical dots, if I click that and I say clone into a new watch list, I'm going to call this emerging leaders tracker, and I'm going to make this today's date. Now, of course, there's a chance that a name might fall off this list tomorrow. So that's why I've added the date on there so I know what date these names came from. So I'll create that list. And then I'm going to come back into the scanner here and say select new scanner. And in my search through menu here, I'm going to search emerging leaders. And there's my emerging leaders tracker list of names, right? Those are the 60 that I found. Now in the conditions, I'm just going to add some conditions here. Going to go into indicator, select the monthly, because I want to specifically, I'm talking about quarter 1, January, February, March, right? So I'm going to type in seasonality here, and I can choose between whether I want to define win rate. So that's positive periods is the same thing as win rate. On Apple, it was 60% in January, right? Or I could choose the percentage change. I want to define positive periods. I'm not so concerned so much about the how much or what to expect percentage wise, but I am interested in positive periods. And I'm just going to define this as something relatively, on the higher end. But again, I want to keep it loose enough that I'll get enough results to kind of look through. So I'm going to say a constant value of 60. So this is essentially saying seasonality for a specific month is greater than a constant value of 60. Well, if I'm referring to quarter 1, I want to say January, February, March, that means I need 3 of these. So I'll use this button right here that duplicates the condition. And then I need to define literally January, February, and March. With my current candle toggled on, it's December right now. So January was 11 months ago. So I'll put 11. That'll define this condition as referring to January. I need one for February. So February was 10 months ago. March was 9 months ago. And then I want to say any of the following. That way, what I've got here now is January, February, March. Any of those 3 months seasonally have at least a 60% win rate in one of those 3 months. I could end up getting results where all 3 months have higher than a 60% win rate, but I need at least one of those months to have a higher than a 60% win rate. Another kind of side thing that I like to do here. You guys know me, I talk about it all the time. I like lots of data. So I'm actually going to increase the look back years to 30 years instead of 20. That's just going to give me a bit more data to look at. I don't know how long any of these companies that are in this list have been around. Some of them are probably pretty new. Some of them might have been around a long time. I want to make sure to capture as much of that data as possible. So I'm just going to increase that look back period from the default 20 up to 30. And so now with this scan ready to go, I can run it and I'm going to get back a new set of names, right? And this set of names to me, I'm finally now at a place where I can, it's a manageable list of names, right? I went from 3,200 symbols in the NMS composite down to about 160 meeting that base criteria. I whittled it down to about 60 using my minimums. And now I've whittled it down to about 25 or 30 using some minimum seasonality criteria. So now maybe the fun part of this whole thing is talking about the names that are showing up in this list. Now, the first thing that I noticed in this list was I've got quite a few quantum computing names. ARQQ's in here. Take a quick look at some of these real quick. ARQQ's in here, coming off a huge base. You've got RGTI is in here. This thing has been a monster over the past few weeks. You've got QMCO. This is the kind of the oldest of the quantum computing names. This is what I was talking about with why I increased that seasonal that data window, because this thing's got 42 years worth of data. So I'm looking further back. Right off the bat, I could see January's for QMCO do quite well. 7% average change, 67% win rate. The name of the 4, though, there was a 4th name here that is a quantum computing name. The name right off the bat that kind of struck me was this one, Sky T. So first, let's talk about the sheer fact that this scan is finding quantum computing names, four of them, right? Right off the bat, this tells me it's doing exactly what I'm looking for it to do. Quantum computing names weren't really on anyone's radar a couple months ago, but now they're really starting to make waves. And when you look through those four names that I mentioned, all of them have these massive volume spikes that are just far beyond anything that any of these names have seen in their history. But SkyT kind of really stuck out to me simply because it hasn't made this type of move that some of those other guys have made when you look at RGTI. I mean, obviously, it's hard to be bearish on RGTI here. However, it's made a huge move. But you could see that volume, that big volume spike that I'm talking about. If RGTI is any indication of what some of these other names might be able to do, then SkyT seems kind of the most interesting to me simply because it's still kind of stuck in this multi-year base. When it comes to, how you would want to manage your risk around this, there's lots of different kind of approaches you could take. If we go down to the daily here, you see kind of why I'm interested in it. You got this nice big push. We've been consolidating for, a week and a half. We only recently got up into that higher relative performance value. So maybe this needs a little bit more time. Maybe it needs to let some of those moving indicators, or rather moving averages, kind of catch up to price action here. But to me, the idea is just above previous highs, or maybe looking back at some of the major highs from the base, you can see where we got stuck right at that $15 level from the February 2023 highs. You could even look further back here. They wicked through it. So if you want a little bit more confirmation, perhaps you want to wait for them to gain that 18 level. But this one, super, super interesting to me as a name to have on clear watch here. If you think that the quantum computing thing is going to continue, and I have a pretty strong assumption that it's likely to. The next name that kind of came up to me that I thought was pretty interesting was this Credo Technology Group. And there were a couple of reasons. The first, it's a relatively new name, 3 years of price history. It does perform well in January, but only 3 years of price history is not that much data to really go off of. Can really only go off of what the chart is doing, in my opinion. And what the chart is doing is exactly what you'd want to see for a power earnings gap. So you had earnings on December 2nd, this thing, big, strong earnings gap higher on the 3rd. And when I say it's exactly what you'd want to see for a power earnings gap up, what I mean is they have gapped up and they have held this thing for a month. They kind of wicked the lows here of that first gap up day back on the 10th. And then they made a new high. They came down, tested, held lows, and they've just consolidated for a month. I mean, it's really kind of exactly what you'd want to see for a power earnings gap up. If they can continue holding this gap, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't just continue pushing it higher. Depending on, what kind of trader you are on a smaller time frame on the daily here, I'm kind of always watching the 21 EMA as my risk on, risk off spot. Learned a lot from Scott Redler in that regard last week. If price is above a rising 21 EMA, you're in pretty good shape. So what I would kind of do here, if you just right click on that moving average, I can create an alert on it. So I'm going to just utilize all of the triggers because I want to be alerted kind of no matter what it does. If price interacts with that moving average, I want to be aware of it. And then I'll just kind of set this for a long period of time and a max trigger. That way, anytime price interacts with that indicator, I'll be in the know. So that's kind of like my daily on-off switch. But, ultimately on a higher time frame, a nice horizontal level kind of just below those lows. If you're trading up and over that gap, to me, that's plenty enough to kind of want to stay long. And this thing is definitely looking like it's ready to continue. Also, we saw quite a few analyst upgrades or buy estimates or buy ratings rather here last month on that earnings report. Goldman and Barclays and Needham and Bank of America all gave buy upgrades. So big one on watch for me is this Credo. The next one that I thought was interesting was BTDR. This is Bitdeer Technologies Group. And, just looking at the chart right off the bat, you can kind of see what I'm looking at here. Huge base, from April 10th, 2023 that they broke out over what, 4 weeks ago at the beginning of December. And again, nice consolidation for 4 weeks. If we drop down to the daily, what is even more interesting to me about this is that once they gained those previous highs, they really didn't look back at all. You had a big push higher. You had the market correction days the week before Christmas week, where price kind of, sold off a little bit with that, but immediately went back, gained a new high on Friday, riding that 21 EMA really nicely. The fact that they didn't come all the way back into those previous highs, the fact that they found support well above them and continued and made a new high, just kind of suggests the sheer amount of strength that this name has. So again, same type of idea. I think above that those previous highs, this thing is smooth sailing. You're at obviously new all-time highs here. So maybe a long-term alert on those highs. If you have any price interaction down there around that $15 level, to me, that seems like a pretty decent spot to take advantage of a long opportunity. Otherwise, trying to stay with the trend as long as you can stay with the trend if you're already in it or if you're thinking about getting into it up here. Another name. I got a few more for you. There were a handful in this list that looked really good to me. Soundhound. Now this one has been getting a lot of attention. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely has been. But the big thing that kind of stuck out to me, again, back up and over those previous all-time highs from the relative IPO high back in May of 2022. The strongest seasonal performance. Again, a younger name, not a lot of data on this name, but February does have the best performance, both as far as win rate and as far as mean change. February seems to be a month where it tends to perform really, really well. So something to keep in the back of your mind there. If we go down to the daily, I like that. Again, they kind of tested. Oops, let's zoom in. They tested those previous all-time highs, right? They gained them, they tested them, they held them, and they've continued moving higher. So although this one is up quite a bit from even just the November, it's hard to argue with this. It's hard to argue with the name at new all-time highs. And again, kind of same ideas for your risk. Just watching those previous highs. They held them nicely before. Could they come back into them again? Totally. If they continue to hold them, I think that's a good sign that this thing is going to continue into quarter one. Two more names for you before we get out of here. We got this name, Poet. And this one is a name that I was not familiar with beforehand, but really interesting price action, in my opinion. You have these big pushes from April until now, just very consistent, big push to new highs on volume. You notice that the volume is increasing with each push too. But you have these big pushes to new highs. You have this long consolidation for about a month or two, and then they just push it to a new high again. They consolidate for about a month or two, push it to a new high again, consolidate, push it to a new high. And what's interesting to me now is that the consolidation period has dramatically decreased, right? This period is about as long as this period is about as long as this period. This one got a little bit shorter than the previous two, but then this one is dramatically shorter. This one's like a third as long before they've gone and pushed it up again. And I would almost argue that this is the most notable push higher that we've seen. To me, this is indicative of like, okay, attention is here now. This is smart money loading up in all of these big pushes, but now I think a lot of eyes are really seriously going to be on this name just because it has taken so much less time to consolidate now than it had previously. So I think this one's going to be a key one to watch. You got seasonality is looking pretty decent in February, 67% win rate in February, followed by March, which is its highest mean change of the year, tends to come in March. And that's 13 years worth of data. So it's a little bit more convincing there for this particular name. While this may be kind of extended, what I would kind of do in this particular instance is I would take an anchored VWAP off of the big initial push candle, and here we are, we're right at it. So a big area to watch if they do fail this. Again, I like my horizontal levels. I like price coming into previous highs. So perhaps that 560 spot might be kind of interesting. I'm going to create an alert just to make sure I'm notified when that comes along. And then we'll be on our way here with this particular name. Two more names for you. PDYN. Now, this is a really good example of us missing the move, but that the scan is finding what we're looking for, right? We're looking for names with explosive potential, and if we had run this scan, 4 days ago, we would have come up across this chart and would have been kind of exactly what we were looking for. You got that big move in late November with a nice month of price coming back in. If you look back at the previous highs, where did they come right to? They came right to those previous highs, and this thing has been off to the races. Again, not much data here, but February, 100% win rate in February. Mean change is very, very high. So another really interesting one to keep a close eye on. I liked that also this one has recently gained its anchored VWAP from September 2021. That's kind of like, where the big drawdown started. So essentially all of your buyers all the way up to $60 are now in the money on this thing. So we're above that average buyer. So perhaps this one needs a little bit of time to come in and retrace and kind of test something a little bit lower. Maybe it needs some of these shorter daily moving averages to kind of catch up. But again, volume is not a liar here. Volume is telling the story. This thing has been a monster over the past couple of days, and it's certainly worth keeping a close eye on. And then last name for you. Let's see. Where is it? Playa. Plya. This one, a totally different look than the rest. This one's got about, what, 6-7 years worth of data. It's IPO'd in March of 2017. And we are right at all-time highs. 7 years of consolidating, and it's starting to push up and out of that absolutely massive base. Hard to deny a new all-time high. Hard to deny a 7-year base. And price really, really nicely consolidating after this giant power gap up. Looks pretty primed to continue. January seasonality, not so great, but that seasonality performance-wise does increase through March with a really nice mean change percentage gain in February's. So we've gone ahead and we've made a short list of these tickers that I've gone over today. We're going to be sharing that list with you. And like I said, this presentation was meant to be a little bit shorter. So that's what I've got for you guys today.